The senior management staff cautioned the participants to be careful of people with mental health conditions as they might be triggered and are often only capable of subpar work. I was diagnosed with adjustment difficulty and anxiety disorder on 2 separate occasions in the past 5 years.
Because the bill was getting a bit steep for my dad, he casually said to me one time, "Hey, actually, you don't need to go for therapy, right? I don't think it's necessary. It's the same thing whether you talk to a therapist or you talk to mommy and daddy."
That really stung and hurt very badly because I felt so misunderstood and belittled. I'm still on medication, although I have decreased my dosage and am slowly weaning off the medication.
Currently, I've also stopped seeing a therapist because of financial issues and switched to seeing a church counselor about once every 2 weeks instead.
It's a big misconception because at psychotherapy sessions, they use trained modalities to teach us how to handle difficult situations emotionally. These things are not taught by daddy or mommy, unless daddy or mommy is a psychotherapist.
Although talking to mommy and daddy and friends is so important, but at the end of the day, when you've got a serious condition, you need that help. And just as someone that has been through something like that before, it's extremely belittling, like what he mentioned, because basically what people are telling you is that you're weak. I was really relieved when I was diagnosed because I was like, man, now there's something I can do about it. There's actually a problem, that I can work with, and I sought therapy and medication, and my life completely changed.
I think Christians also have some sort of stigma against it, that maybe if you have Jesus, if you're able to pray this away, then there's no need to have to talk to anybody else. Or why don't you talk to your pastor? Yeah, but who are the people that we talk to when we go to therapy? I think they are experts, and there's no reason why we should belittle what God can do with people who are already trained to help. I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was 19 years old. I became a Christian 3 years prior.
I didn't think that I would experience hopelessness and despair even though I had come to know the living God.
Some people didn't know I was battling with depression because it can't always be seen. Even my mother, who knew my condition, asked me, "How can you have depression? You are always so happy."
I'm 30 years old now, and till this day, I still have many unanswered questions as to why I struggled with depression even though I know God. But I guess this is where faith comes in.
To believe when I cannot believe, to trust when I cannot see, to live on even when I do not feel like living on.
I'm still learning each day to lay this silly, sometimes reckless, and mostly unsure heart into God's hands. For He is the maker of my own heart, and I will never know myself more than my Maker does.
I think the part that stood out to me most was the fact that she was so happy. Everyone thought she was so happy. Her mother was confused why she had depression, even though she was happy. I'm a lot more sensitive to people that are overly happy and sometimes humorous, because in many ways this is how we cope. If you look at the life of Robin Williams, for instance, the thing that energized him was to make others happy. I think that was because he was so acquainted with that deep pain and sorrow within, and just not being able to escape. Sometimes humor, joy, and just enjoying the simple things is one quick escape.
Yeah, I think the spiritual insecurity also is something that is quite relatable. When something is wrong in your life, you tend to project it onto, oh, is it my relationship with God is wrong?
I remember when I was first diagnosed with schizoaffective, God, how could you let this happen? I'm even serving you, I'm doing all this, why? How could you? But it was actually God that inspired me to get medication through a vision that He gave me while I was sick, because I refused the medication because I was ashamed of it. He asked me, so if a marathon runner were to break her leg, what would she need to do? And I said, well, I'll need to wear a cast, right, in order to finish the race. And he was like, so okay, then you better take your medicine, because your brain is your bone and your medication is your cast. You want to finish this race of life, take your medication. So I think at that point of time when God gave that revelation to me was, oh my goodness, I'm sick. Like I have a mental health condition, you know, and I need to take my medication. So it was only when I started to accept it that I was actually able to start healing.
Once I was invited to share about mental resilience at an online HR meeting. I was scheduled to speak after a senior management staff.
And was surprised to hear how the senior management staff cautioned the participants to be careful of people with mental health conditions as they might be triggered and are often only capable of subpar work.
It was the first time in many years that I, a person on a mental health journey, felt stigmatized. Towards the end of 2020, I faced my lowest point. COVID-19 affected my business and finances. Projects were cancelled and my personal savings often dwindled below $100.
However, I've been blessed to be supported by caring brothers and sisters in Christ who journeyed along with me during this difficult period.
One brother, for example, gave me a substantial rate packet upon hearing of my financial plight. Despite him not being in employment while he undergoes theological studies.
Others would check in with me, show their care by sending food our way during the circuit breaker and praying for us.
Our pastor also called upon us to visit, and I also received counseling from a Christian counseling center as I worked on my recovery.
I think COVID-19 was a huge trigger for most people. And I think COVID-19, just by the nature of it, it is a stress that doesn't go away. Imagine COVID-19 is a car, but it's just constantly coming. And I think that's how much pressure is on all of us, whether we know it or not. Yeah, and some of us maybe already have additional baggage. And so, it really just explodes in our face.
And I think there's this misconception where this condition is so debilitating where you can't even perform. If you want to look in the professional sense of things, I was in the corporate world for about 10 years. It didn't affect performance. So for me, that misconception is completely just uncalled for. That's really just an indication of a lack of care or desire to understand a little bit better of what's going on. And that is just the world that we live in. We struggle to get through. What I would encourage people that go through this is, it's difficult, but try not to take it so personally, because it's not a personal attack. It's someone's ignorance, basically.
Often, media would portray persons with mental health conditions as very easily triggered, sensitive, and everybody has to walk on eggshells around them. But there are actually also a lot of mental health conditioned people that want to be normal. You know, they don't want their mental health condition to define them, but it's also depending on person to person, right? So I've also met people who are sensitive. They're like, oh, how dare you call me crazy, you know, and then they get into a whole spiel about it, about being insensitive and what have you. So it really depends on, you know, the person with the condition, how we steward this. Do we allow the stigma to overcome us, or do we rise up and help people understand what this is all about and use this to be able to be light to others, you know, and show God's grace that I have this, but despite having this, God is still good, you know, that He's still real to me, you know, that I can still be loving and helpful and a contribution to society, and I can still be a blessing because God still calls me to be a blessing.
The second part was really the support from the church, which was amazing. How the pastor wanted to be there quite often and asked them to come over to their house. The guy that was in Bible school giving money even though not having a job. People lending a support. For me, that is a picture of a healthy, serving church. We may not have professional resources, but we can surely love each other, and that got this guy so far ahead in his journey, and I think that's a great example. I think a church needs to be able to understand when someone needs professional help and when someone just needs counseling. For a church to be able to be a little bit more educated and to be able to point people in the right direction, I think that's where we need to move towards.
I would lash out and question my parents why they had me when they weren't ready to be parents.
And even if I do marry someone one day, my marriage will not last.
I think it just feels like you failed your parents and you had to take the responsibility to fix everything.